Well, welcome to another edition of It's Only Rock and Roll, and we love it. We love it. We do. It's very much a world tour at the moment. We've been to all sorts of places, Denmark, connections with America, and I think today we start with London and probably have a little bit of a side trip to China as we welcome our guest on board. So, Russell, a different angle as well, from production to where we are now, security.
Yeah, it's. I always say this is a bit of a cliche. You know, we're really excited every time we get a new guest on. What we've tried to look at is all aspects of putting the events together, the shows together, and I guess the unsung heroes. You know, obviously you have the artists, and we have spoken to artists, and we've had some very entertaining artists on. But it's really the people that are dedicated to putting the show on, and there's a lot of aspects to it. And I've tried to look back in time and get people on that I've obviously worked with or know, so that we can look into their illustrious careers, really. And like I said before, everyone has a story and it's worth listening to. And our guest today is no less. Ronnie and I, Ronnie Franklin, who's our guest today, who's A to Z of security, which in its own terms it might sound a bit boring, but trust me, as we go through this podcast, his life has been far from boring. And it started in the 70s and up until present day, and he's got a lot of stories to tell, and hopefully we're going to be able to relay some of those to our viewers and listeners today. So Ronnie, mate, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's good. Yeah. It's good to hear you and see you after all this time. And over to you, mate, Phil.
Right, yes, unsung heroes, those people behind the scenes, away from the stage, making things tick over and keeping people safe. So, Ronnie, welcome on board this podcast. Let's start off like we always do with our guests. How did you get started in security? And no doubt you've got numerous recollections of working in this area of entertainment.
So I think like a lot of people in the sort of backgrounds of the music industry, it was by chance, really. I mean, I think it was around 1978, 79. I was newly engaged. I was about to get married. I was looking to earn some extra money, and a friend of mine said to me, "Oh, you know, why don't you come and do some security stewarding work at the Rainbow Theatre in Finsbury Park? You know, you could do 2 or 3 nights a week or whatever." At that time, the Rainbow was like one of the most popular venues, I believe, in town. So they were very busy. And so I went along. The company that was in charge was called Artist Services, owned by Don Murphy. And so I joined them and started working on a regular basis at the Rainbow. I think we provided all the security. It was front of house and backstage, so dressing rooms, front door, exits, in the barriers, the pit. So yeah, so that was my introduction to music.
But the Rainbow, Ronnie, was an amazing venue. I mean, I love that place, and I have a memory. I mean, I did loads of bands there back in the day, but I remember clearly shooting a video there, which maybe you might have been doing security for, where they had a lot of punters in to shoot a video with Bow Wow Wow. You remember Annabelle with the more?
Annabelle Bow Wow.
You remember? Yeah. Go Wild in the Country. Remember that?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe you were there. We hadn't met at that stage, but
maybe. I mean, I do remember doing something with Bow Wow Wow at the Rainbow, because it was one of those funny moments that I was backstage at that point, doing backstage security with a team of guys, dressing rooms, stage door, etc., etc. And I vividly remember Malcolm McLaren, who was their manager.
Oh yeah.
He came up to me and said,
also the Sex Pistols, no?
Yeah, he was still. Yeah, I think the Sex Pistols were kind of on the wane, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
And Bow Wow Wow were on the up.
No, but he was their manager, wasn't he?
Was their manager? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And famously for me, it was my first sort of run-in with a soon-to-be mega pop star, but Malcolm basically said to me, "Look, there's a guy coming to the show. He's going to be backstage, but whatever happens, he must not come on stage." And it was Boy George.
Oh, right.
So we had to kindly remind him that he wasn't allowed on stage while the performance was on. And he may have been, I mean, I can't remember.
He's a big guy, George, as well, isn't he?
He was.
The people don't think, he's all this effeminate like, dress, but he's a big guy, and I think he used to do a bit of boxing.
Did
So
I
you
think?
had your work cut out, Ronnie.
Yeah, I think his family were. I think they were into a bit of boxing, if I remember rightly. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
The Rainbow was
that
a
was
great.
kind of my baptism of fire, if you like, into security. Yeah. Rainbow Theatre. It was a great place.
So baptism of security at the Rainbow, you say, and then of course looking at your CV, doing a bit of research about what you've done, the biggest shows, the places
Yeah.
like Nebworth with Led Zeppelin. I remember going there seeing Pink Floyd, and talking Pink Floyd at Earl's Court, number one of your gigs, so to speak. And what about reggae, Bob Marley? And
Oh,
Crystal Palace, amongst
yeah.
many of the people you've worked with.
Yeah.
Share us what is your actual role for events like that? And it must have been a great start, a great learning curve. What did you pick up along the way?
So, excuse me, as memory serves me, I mean, we were all learning back in those days. I mean, security was kind of, it was an afterthought in a lot of, especially in promoters' mind. It was like, oh, is this a necessary expense, and can you keep the numbers down and such and such? And so we were always fighting as companies, and there were a few companies around at the time, and we were always fighting to get the manpower numbers up so that we could man the events safely. I mean, security is about, it's not just about looking after the artist or band, whoever. It's about the crowd and the fans and everyone involved, and all the crew as well. So if you have an unsafe, unsecure venue, site, whatever, then people get hurt. It's as simple as that. And so managing events like, as a member of a team back in those days, I was part of a team of people. We had to look at all sorts of aspects in terms of people coming into the venue, for example, without tickets, that sort of thing. People trying to get in, trying to break into venues in those days. Doesn't seem to happen as much nowadays. And so perimeter security, which was always an issue with the promoter because they didn't really want to pay for it. And then you've got backstage security, which again, back in those days, it tended to be split between companies. So one company, like if I was still at Artist Services for Nebworth, for example, we would be controlling the front of house, and then another company, I think it was Jim Callahan's company, Callahan, they would be controlling the backstage area. And so between us, we would, we'd man those events, manage those events, and try and make sure they went well. So.
I'm surprised our paths didn't cross. I was trying to blag my way into the front stage area as a young broadcaster journalist. So a lot of it crowd control, entry control, but was it sort of driven by the excitement of the fans getting more excited and wanting to jump on stage rather than sort of external, what should we say, sources? People who've got other ulterior motives for getting in close to a star.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, I think in the music and in that sort of in our industry, back in those days, it was more about crowd control and about stopping people, over exuberant fans, if you like.
Sure, yeah. Any standout moments of crazy activities or crazy ways of people trying to get in or on stage? There must have been a few.
There's all, apart from the obvious of trying to scale fences and over 12-foot high fences and stuff like that with guard dogs running around, there's always there's always the more elaborate ruses of trying to copy passes. That was a thing.
Okay, was it?
Thing, where people made up passes. And when you're on a big site, like a Nebworth or a Milton Keynes Bowl or those sort of open air sites, there tends to be a lot of passes, various types. You've got whole range of hospitality passes and backstage passes and TV crew and press and this and that. And so some of the ingenious fans would make up their own passes,
Really? Okay.
Have their way through like that. So
one other thing from this sort of era, this sort of time, communication was very different, I suppose, to what it is now in terms of walkie-talkies and everything else. What did you have to work with? How did you
Well,
communicate with
yeah, we
team?
did. I mean, we in those days we did have some radio communication. It was very poor. You know, you literally walk around a corner and lose radio contact.
Yeah,
Um, and you know, we had. I can remember that if it's like at Nebula, for example, we had a base station where we would erect a base station up with a big aerial to try and give us better radio communication. But even
yeah,
that wasn't great back in those days, you know. So it was more a case of, you know, if something needed to be done, you would, you know, like on a site like that before Milton Keynes, you know, we'd put 3 or 4 guys in a Land Rover and rush them off to wherever the problem might.
yeah, yeah,
It either
yeah,
sort itself out or they get there in time to help sort out whatever the problem might be. So
yeah.
I
So
mean, from that, Ronnie, obviously the industry of security, let's call it the industry of security, had to develop and become more sophisticated to move with sophistication of the technical side of the industry and the technical things that were advancing in the world. You know, it's just normal. But with the pass thing, you know, then you'd have the pass board with all the, you know, so the security, even the security, like you say, they used to get, if you had local security supporting your team, even they get confused which pass is which. You know, you'd have a briefing, but then they'd forget half the passes, so you'd have to have that board, and even that was an advance to what it was in the first place, wasn't it? You know.
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like I I remember just thinking back onto, for example, we'll get onto the Faith Tour, but I do remember, you know, speaking to Jake about passes for the Faith Tour and trying and saying like we need to keep this as simple as possible because
Yeah.
going to other countries where, you know, back in the 80s where security may have been a little bit less advanced, if you want to, you know, for whatever word you want to use,
Yeah.
than it was in the UK. And it needs to be simple. It almost needs to be black and white, like,
Yeah.
and try and keep it, you know, you go to some events and you can see like 20 different passes.
It's so complicated. Yeah.
You
So
know,
even the security
yeah,
they get confused.
yeah, you're expecting a guy who's being paid, you know, like minimum wage to stand in on a gate to understand all of that. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
not fair on them, really. So, you
No.
know, my view has always been let's keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. So just retracking a bit there, you started out that way. It was very clear how you started. And then there was a little bit of a side shift where Showsec came into it, and you immediately became like very involved with Showsec and as a partner. I mean, you must have been still quite young.
Yeah, I was in my, I must have been just in my mid-20s, I guess. Yeah, 25. 20.
Yeah. Because
So
Showsec is like awesome. I mean, it's
yeah,
so
yeah.
famous.
So yeah, that came about. Artist services, where we all worked at the time, or most of us worked at the time. Don, who was the owner, had gone off to manage Adam and the Ants for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And
Do bad.
who knew?
Yeah.
And so some of us, Mick Upton, who was kind of the head guy at Artist then in terms of actual the work. I think he became a bit disillusioned with the way that company was going and felt the need to change. So he decided to set up Showsec with another guy called Jerry Slater.
I remember Jerry. Yeah.
Remember Jerry, right?
Yeah.
So, and Mick approached myself and a couple of other guys and said, look, we're gonna form this new company. Obviously there's going to be some conflict in terms of, you know, relationships with previous company, but are you interested in coming along? And we said yes, and off we went. And initially it was run out of Mick's home, but then and he asked me to come on board more or less full time at that point. And we moved to an office in Fulham in a basement underneath a music company called Concessions who did merchandise. They gave us an office down in their basement, and so that's kind of the beginnings of Showsec. And it was very, you know, it was very new. We didn't have a lot of work, to be fair. Mick had some contacts at the BBC, and we did some live broadcast stuff with them. Like, Superstars, I think, was one of theirs. Radio 1 Roadshow, and then we got into Capital Radio, and we did some of their best disco in town events and things like that.
Okay.
We grew it. You know, Jerry and I would go out and punt for work, if you like. You know, we promoted and
it's tough
and stuff, but it was tough. But you know, but we succeeded. Yeah, we started picking up promoter. You know, the promoters started coming to us, asking us to provide security backstage at Wembley Arena, long before any of the other big sort of venues came along. Because most security at the time was in house. You know, Hammersmith Odeon, like that. It was all done in house. And I think the promoters felt that if they were renting, like if they were taking over the building to promote a show, they wanted certain amount of control in certain areas.
Yeah, of
so
course,
backstage security became devoid, you know, separate from front of house. Front of house may have remained with the Hammersmith people.
Yeah.
For a concert, then they would bring in some, you know, backstage security, and between us and Cooler Hand and a couple of other companies, that's how we started to go.
Ronnie, you mentioned Radio 1 Roadshow. I'm familiar with that from a fan's or spectator perspective, because I grew up in a seaside town, Weston-super-Mare, and every summer they would descend with their Arctic truck and set up the stage on the beach. It would be the donkeys. Weston-super-Mare is famous for its donkeys. One side, it was a big event, and people perhaps don't realise how big the Radio 1 Roadshow was at the height of its popularity. Huge, wasn't it? Huge. And talking about
that was more of a crowd control. You know, that was a crowd.
Sure, yeah.
Also, you know, you weren't focusing on security of any one particular person or act or whatever. It was trying to manage the crowds that built up, because they were free events, obviously.
Yeah,
they weren't paying so anyone could just turn up at any time, and you could have 100 people or you could have 10,000 people. You need to kind of really know what you expect, you know.
Yeah, big crowds. I think Weston-super-Mare is probably more like 10 or 20,000. The beach was taken over. Huge, absolutely huge. And then staying with radio, Capital Radio, I think that was where you sort of made contact with the famous duo of Wham. So how did that progress, and the big tours you did?
So that, I think, when my memory serves me, it was around, it was the early 80s. I think it was 81, 82. Wham had been around a little bit. They had tried to have some success. It hadn't quite happened. And I think it's documented, they were given a chance to be on Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
Someone had pulled out, which kind of shot their single up the charts. And they were doing, I remember, I think I met them first at the Lyceum in the Strand, Capital thing. And they obviously, you know, the kids were it was just mayhem in terms of screaming kids, you know, all under the age of 15, I guess, you know. And Pete Wilson from Harvey's Goldsmith's office was there, and he was telling me about the tour that they were putting together for this group for Wham. And he said, you know, this is, you know, he said, we've done a few of these things and the kids are just going mad for them, and you know, we can envisage that there's going to be problems in terms of, you know, getting in and out of venues, you know, trying to manage screaming teenagers and whatever. He said, so
sensible.
We might need some security on the tour. And I said, okay, well, look, if you do, then, you know, come and talk to us. So he did. Initially, there's a guy called Dave Mulder who I've worked with before. He worked with us at Showsec, and he'd worked with Adam and the Ants on tour. And Barry Mead, I believe, was going to be the tour manager. And Barry had worked with him on a couple of events and stuff. So we agreed that Dave would go out on tour. So Dave went off, and I think the first show was in Aberdeen, if I remember right. And I get a phone call the next morning from Dave saying, okay, this is not a one-man job. Can you meet me in Glasgow or somewhere? I was like, because this is crazy. So I went off to the next show, and it was absolute mayhem. I mean, it literally was, you know, the building was surrounded from, I guess, 3 o'clock in the afternoon with thousands of kids, girls, mainly girls, a lot without tickets. They were just there to see the boys, you know, turn out. And so getting in and out of the venue became a challenge.
It was Beatlemania, wasn't it?
It was Beatlemania. I mean, you know, I mean, was probably just a bit too young for Beatlemania. But I mean, I remember growing up with listening to the Beatles songs and seeing some of the stuff on film and TV, whatever. But yeah, it was kind of like that. It was.
I think that's sort of moving on with Wham and that. I think that's where you and I first met each other.
Yeah.
And I remember Dave Moulder, but as I remember it, Dave was working with George and you were working with Andrew, which seems on the outset seems an easy gig, but actually it wasn't, because Andrew brought all his mates along and they needed as much managing. I mean, it was like herding cats, wasn't it? Looking after Andrew. He was such a lovely guy.
Yeah. They were. I mean, they were great guys, but it was like
Yeah.
like school children being let loose. You know, they literally.
And then you had the mum and dad and this one and that one and auntie this.
Yeah,
and the sisters, of course.
Both parents.
Yeah.
George's two sisters.
Yeah, your daughter and Melanie.
Yeah, Andrew's brother and his mum and dad would come along, and Andrew's friend. It was about 4 of them, I think, if I remember rightly. But it was a lot of people. I mean, you know, it was new for them. You know, to be fair, you know, they'd suddenly been elevated into this kind of you know, mad world of pop hysteria. And so, you know, they obviously played along with it. Andrew more so than George. I think George was like, "Oh, hang on a minute, this is a bit crazy." Andrew, I think Andrew loved it a bit more.
But I because I was about 23, 24, I was a little bit older than George and Andrew, just only a little bit. I just remember it being a lot of fun. It was crazy, but a lot of fun, and it was a bit of a family atmosphere on the road, because obviously it was the family. But we sort of, I mean, I remember going to the cinema with Yoda, you know, and she get used to come to my parties and stuff, you know, and we were all very friendly, and it was a good atmosphere, because, like you say, it was a learning curve for them, and it was all new to them. But yeah, it was mad.
No, it was. I mean, as you say, it was more like a family tour, if you like. You know, literally,
yeah.
You know, friends and family tour. I mean, the friends and family room backstage was, you know, always the busiest room. So
yeah.
But it was good. It was good fun.
I do remember, Ronnie, and this is for our viewers and listeners. Ronnie's not your typical, what you would maybe cliched security guy. You know, you always think of the nightclub bouncer beefer type. He's not that sort of guy. He's more strategic than that. And I want to embarrass you, Ronnie, but I used to like it. You used to come in with the boys, or later on you obviously looking after George, and you'd always come in, you know, with him and always say, "Everything all right?" You know, and you were very calm about everything. But I always noticed that you always had a good handle and everything, and I think that's probably, and you can explain it better because it's your industry. You always had eyes and ears everywhere, and you're always like a move ahead. You know, is there any danger there? Is that going to be a potential problem? And I mean, is that fair? I always found you very calm, even though potentially there were a lot of, you know, catastrophic things that could happen.
Well, I think from my point of view, as you say, I'm not the biggest person in the world, and I don't impose myself on people. That wasn't my style.
No,
my style was, you know, someone always said to me, like, if doing security in the entertainment world, if you like, if you have to resort to physical violence, then you've failed in your job, because
you
shouldn't be in a position. You should have, you know, you should be planning ahead enough that those things don't come up. Now, that's not to say they never come up, obviously, because they can. But generally speaking, when you're dealing with celebrities, you're dealing with people who like them and they want to be close to them for whatever reason. They want autographs, they want photos, they want to shake their hands, they want to give them a hug, a kiss, or whatever. Obviously, there's going to be the odd occasion where someone is going to do something for whatever reason. And we've had those incidents over the years. But to be full, I can't remember throughout my career ever being in a situation that we've had to, any of us that have worked with me or alongside me on my tours, have ever had to use physical force to do our job. And security has changed over those years. It used to be much more, men in dinner suits with bow ties and, chucking people through doors and that sort of thing. Nowadays, it's much more regulated. The security regulations came into force many years ago in terms of licensing people, and in the in the what people want to call bodyguarding roles or whatever they want to, however they want to term it, the terminology keeps changing. It's become more professional, and so you still will see, some very big people working security on certain artists, and that's because that's what the artist wants. They want physical presence for whatever reason, and it does work. Obviously, it can deter people. There's no question about it. But then you get other artists who don't want that, and George was certainly one of those who shunned security as much as possible, but he understood it was necessary. And so when his brief to me was always, we just need to keep it as low key as possible.
So with the fan frenzy, Beatlemania, or in this case, Wham mania, Ronnie, there must have been, I mean, obviously the old goal was to get the boys from the venue, out of the venue or into the venue safely. Would it extend to the hotels? And also, I mean, there must have been, the aim to get them safely to wherever. There must have been some times where the mania was really over the top and you had to perhaps, I don't know, use different ways of getting the boys out of their venue or to the hotel. Any sort of
we used
colourful moments?
I mean, we've used police vans, ambulances,
What about wigs and disguises?
Well, not so much of that. I mean, that really didn't work too well.
I don't think it wouldn't.
You would have tried it if you could.
Well, yeah. But generally, I mean, we would use all sorts of things. I mean, obvious things of not going out stage doors. Everyone would be hanging around. We'd hopefully be able to park a vehicle in a side somewhere out of the way that no one really knew about and slip out that way. Hotels, I think I've been through more corridors in the backs of hotels, kitchens and service bays and service stairs and stairs that stink to high heaven. To get in and out of hotels. So, I mean, some of the, so back in Wham Mania days, I remember, I remember in Australia, I think it was, there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 kids outside the hotel when we arrived.
Siebel Townhouse.
Siebel Townhouse, yeah.
They used to sing Wham songs all night. Do you remember?
Yeah.
That was really welcome, wasn't
it? What, for the other guests, yeah.
Well, for us, we just wanted to sleep. We'd heard them all before.
Exactly. Yeah. So being creative, getting in and out of places became an art form. I think for a lot of us in this experience, especially during those times. There were a lot of bands around at the time. Not just Wham. You had the Duran, Spandau Ballet, and those sort of Culture Club. They all had their own problems with their own fans, and not physical problems, just numbers of people. Sheer numbers of people trying to get close to them. So funny.
So on that note, those artists, I think Russ in Dubai, you had an easy time in terms of fan mania because it was a much older audience most of the time, expats, and very few screaming teenagers.
Well, not an Engelbert Humperdinck gig.
Or Shirley Bassey and
The main problem I had with Shirley Bassey was she was chasing my mate Ian. She liked him, so we had to put him in the truss on a truss spot in the end to hide him. It was a good-looking guy in those days.
I do remember, like with fan mania. I remember on the first time we went to Japan with Wham, and the Japanese are, they're a funny old bunch, aren't they? Really?
They're strange, yeah. I was on that tour.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where you could actually get the interpreter to say to people, like the kids, stand still and stand back, and they would do it. They would listen to you. Well, you try that in England or anyone else, they're just going to laugh at you. So I
remember in Japan, the first show, we were all shocked, and you probably remember this as well, because it was such chaotic. I mean, the noise was just phenomenal for all the UK shows. And then you turn up in Japan, and they come off after the first number. And if you remember, George used to come off and he used to like have a drink and ask what the next number was and who was talking and all that stuff. And he was like, this is fucking weird, he said, because there was just it was sort of so polite. It was polite hysteria,
right, applause and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it was like we're not used to this, you know. So that took a bit of getting used to. And what I remember, Ronnie, from that was they used to follow us. The same people used to follow us all over Japan, and I remember going to a restaurant, walking down the road to a restaurant, and there'd be this little patter of feet behind you, and there'd be all these fans following crew. and I had a meal on my own once, sitting in sitting on the floor in a Japanese restaurant, and there were all these fans. They came in the restaurant, and I felt bad. I said, "Well, sit down. Do you want anything?" No, they just wanted to sit there and look at me.
Yeah.
It was so odd.
Very sweet.
Yeah, very odd.
Used to bring presents, to every vet. You see the same people, they bring a present for you. And we were just a crew. So it was mad.
So that was Japan. What was it like in the sort of neighbouring China then? Fans very much the same or a different approach, different attitude?
So the China tour, China was a trip. That wasn't it? God, I mean, cool. Seriously, I mean, I just, there's so many different things in China that come to mind. The fact that we were going there in the first place was a bit...
Sure, yeah.
Well, we went to Hong Kong first, didn't we?
We did go to Hong Kong. We did 2 shows in Hong Kong, 2 warm-up shows. Didn't we?
Yeah, and to earn a bit of money because the Chinese fleeced Simon and Jazz.
But they weren't going to get any money. No one was going to earn money. So, so we did the 2 warm-up shows in Hong Kong, which went down really well. And then off we went to what was
Peking.
Peking, back in those
days. Yeah.
I just, my first memory of it was being, I think we stayed at a Sheraton hotel, if I remember. I think it was one of the only Western built hotels at the time, 1984, 85, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were built by they had a couple of nice hotels built by Canadians.
Yeah,
but I think early days.
Sheraton, I think it might have a Sheraton Tower sort of structure. But I remember driving, we landed in the airport, and the official Workers' Party cultural attaches or whoever they were ready there to meet us with the cars and in their dark suits and people.
Well, they were wearing Mao suits in those days, Ronnie. They were still wearing those grey Mao suits. Do you remember?
Yeah. And driving to the hotel, looking at it, thinking, gee, this place is desolate, really. It's like, it's very grey. There weren't many trees. There were, there was no one on any of the streets, and very few cars.
And there were still horse and carts around,
and a lot of bicycles.
Millions of bikes,
millions of bikes, And then we went. I don't know if it was before I'm sure it was before the first show. We were invited to the British Embassy to have drinks on the lawn, which again,
madness.
Who does that? And, so, and the embassy, they had it was funny because we got to the embassy and we were shown around a bit, and then went out into the lawn, and then at the back of the lawn was another structure, and I said to someone, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, that's our pub." And we go, and they built a pub basically at the back of the lawn so they could go and have a drink every now and again. And then
very much the same in the Middle East and places
where
not being served.
And then we're sat. I mean, Dave Mulder and I were just standing around. George and Andrew were off shaking hands with everyone. Chuck comes up to us and he says, "I understand you 2 chaps are, very British. This guy, I understand you 2 chaps are looking after the security of the boys and stuff." And I was like, "Yes, we are." He said, "I just want to sort of tip you the wink that be careful what you say in the cars." And also stay in your hotel room, he said, because basically everywhere is bugged.
Wow.
Okay, thank you very much for that information.
But it was I mean, from my side, I remember all those things you were saying as well. I didn't go to the embassy, but uh, I remember the crew were in one hotel and the band were in another hotel, and it was really a slog to get that gig on. I remember they had all these 1940s open
Flatbed truck.
trucks, yeah, and they had no ramps, so they were pushing like incredibly heavy flight cases up a plank.
Yeah.
And we were just like closing our eyes. Anyway, eventually got the gig on. One of the funny things from the sound check was they'd never heard such loud music before, and there were a few people in the venue. And I remember they just all ran out because they'd never heard such loud music. And
Yeah.
the other thing, which I remember very funny, and God bless him, he's no longer with us, Dion Estes. He was the very charismatic bass player, Phil, with the dreadlocks. You see him in all the old Wham. And he was such a character, wasn't he, Ronnie? And I remember us coming back from the venue really late, tired and hungry, but there was no room service in our hotel. And I was like, God, what are we going to do? We're starving, It's and like you say, there's nothing there. It's not like it is now. And I said, I know someone. Let's go to the band's hotel. I bet Dion Estes. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I bet he's having a party in his room because every night he has a party in his room. And they have room service. And what we'll do, we'll go to the hotel and we'll just go in his room and order some room service, And they said, oh, yeah, good idea. Do you reckon? I said, yeah, for sure. He said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. No. Go down to reception. I said, I want to speak to Dion Estes. Put me through to his room. There's all this noise and chaos going on and music and everything. He's like, hey, man, what's going on? I said, can we come and have room service in your room? And he goes, yeah, sure, man, come up. So we sat, I can't remember who, I think it was Judge, the lighting guy, and someone else. I can't remember anyway. And we sat in the middle, like when they bring the room service in on a little white thing, a little round table. We were sitting in the middle of this party, an ongoing party, eating room service in Dion Estes' room. Yeah, I mean, you just had to improvise,
Every night. Dion had a party in his room every night.
Every night. He's the only guy who he probably earned the most money out of the band, but at the end he was in negative. Lovely guy though. Lovely guy. Well, as we do in all these things, Phil, I've totally lost my way. The only thing I would like to say, Ronnie, I would like to just quickly say to you, of going back to Australia, and I don't know if you remember this, or maybe Phil could remind us.
Regarding the football, but before that, staying with China, wasn't there some sort of incident on an aeroplane which was a bit hair-raising, a bit scary to say the least?
There was. I mean, I think it's been well enough documented. I mean, basically, and I'm not going to mention names on this, obviously, but there was an incident with a member of the band who, how do I put this? He had a moment on the plane.
Yeah.
Which, when you look back at it, was obviously quite scary for a number of people. Dave and I had to restrain him.
Intervene, yeah.
And
I was 2 seats behind him.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of screaming and shouting and people running up. And I don't know if you remember Harvey running up and down, trying to talk to Chinese stewardesses and stewards, explaining what's happening. I think they turned the plane back. They turned the plane around.
Oh, I think they thought that it was being hijacked.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Really?
Wow. So the plane got turned around and we had to land back into the main airport, Peking. We were on the way to Canton, weren't we? Yeah. So we and I don't really. I have vague memories of it, but apparently Jake told me afterwards. He said, "I've never seen a plane go down."
Well, I can let you into something after all these years. A friend of my sister's, his dad worked at Gatwick Airport, and Gatwick Airport, apparently in those days, I don't know if it's still the case, used to run all the data from all the flights. And if there was ever a problem or a crash or anything, they'd run all the data and they'd come up with a report of what they felt might have been, the thing. Anyway, they ran all the data on that particular flight, and it should have crashed because what happened is when a plane goes down, it goes down in stages. But if it goes down too quickly, quite literally the wings come off and it crashes. But this guy got scared and he just went down. If you remember, it was literally, and I remember.
Well, I don't remember it because we were.
Well, because you were restraining him,
Yeah,
and I remember.
I don't remember that bit at all.
Yeah, I remember Pepsi and I think Pepsi and Shirley were on it. I think they were saying the one I do remember is Don
They were
Air.
immediately behind him. So
Yeah. They were very scared, and obviously, and I remember Don Air, because had a real fear of flying, and he was just cursing. He was cursing the guy, saying, "How could you do that to me? You know, I hate flying." Anyway, it was the biggest problem was we had 100 journalists on the plane, so we couldn't really hide it, could we?
No hiding it. There was no
My family, I don't know about you, but it was sort of plane disaster with Wham, and my family were like, you know, because it wasn't like we didn't have mobile phones and all that to get in touch.
Well, 100 journalists on board, and I've never heard this story before. So I've been.
Oh, it was all over. It was all over
the time it was. Yeah.
Anyway, with flights lined up in the near future, let's move on from flying to something perhaps a bit more cheerful than football. And wasn't there a football match? I think you were playing with Rod. You played football with Rod Stewart in Australia. Part of the Wham tour.
Do you remember that, Ronnie?
Yeah, I kind of remember it. I mean, Andrew was a massive football fan. He was a Queen's Park Rangers fan. So any given moment, he'd be putting his Queen's Park Rangers kit on and trying to have a kick around wherever it might have been. And I think Rod was touring at the same time as us. So they arranged. And Rod
was staying at the Feeble Townhouse.
Yeah, and Rod was a big football fan, and you know, he had his kind of
had his brothers.
Yeah. So our match was arranged, but we played football in China as well. I mean, I don't know if you remember.
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to play in that, and that came on a previous podcast where I told Jake I'm still mortified that Benny Collins wouldn't let me play in it. But I used to play football with Andrew a lot. If you remember, out the back of the Melbourne venue,
anywhere he could find a football, anywhere he
anywhere. But I'll tell you my memory of this, Ronnie, was which I still laugh about, is I came back from the gig to have a shower. I'd been working at the gig and had a bit of time off, because on that first world tour we had a lot of time off. We did 11 gigs in 6 weeks, which is unheard of, or 13 gigs in 6. There was loads of time off. Anyway, so I'd been at the gig and I wanted to come back for a shower, and I was booked to go back, and the lift opened, Ronnie, and there was you and Andrew in his Queen's Park Rangers kit. I can't remember what kit you had on, and you were standing, and you were standing there. I just found it so funny. And you said, and Andrew said, "Come, we're going to go and play with Rod Stewart football. Go and get changed." I said, "But I've got to get back to the venue." He said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll cover for you. Bullshit." So I rushed upstairs. I got my football kit on, got down, and within a couple of minutes, went into the lobby. I was sitting in a limo opposite Rod Stewart and his brothers and you and Andrew. And if you remember, we went to a park and put jumpers down and we had a game of football. And as I remember, they kicked the shit out of us. They were really good, actually.
They were good.
Others were like 50.
Well, they were playing regularly. Rob was playing, his team. But
yeah.
A lot.
It was his 40th. He just celebrated a couple of weeks before his 40th birthday. And we were all staying at the Feeble Townhouse.
Everyone stayed at the Feeble Townhouse.
Everyone did. It's gone now, apparently.
Yeah, it went quite a few years ago. Yeah. It was an institution,
but I mean, in those days, I mean, it was nice, really, because it's quite pure. Because they're just memories. Got no photos or anything. You got no recollection of these things because we just didn't have. We didn't. Now there's the photos of everything. But we're just in a park like a normal blokes having a game of football. It was great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It was good fun. I mean, there are a lot of good memories from those times. I mean, it was a learning curve for a lot of people, even for Andrew and George, dealing with the fame, the celebrity status, the fans, the press, the lack of privacy, and also it's trying, but I think it's still enjoyable.
And for my
Andrew told me a funny story. Sorry, I'll just tell this. He told me a funny story about fame and that. He told me two funny stories actually about his mum, who was lovely. She used to come out with us as well. She was a teacher, wasn't she, his mum? And uh, and Albie, his dad, he had, if you remember, his mum used to invite fans in for a cup of tea at their house.
All the time.
Yeah, so Andrew would come home and there'd be all these fans in the house. And he'd say, "Oh, I just invited them in." Do you remember that? She used to invite them in because
All
they're
the
just normal people, bless them. But the other one that Andrew told me was one time he had a beautiful Italian girlfriend. I can't remember her name, something Filippello or something. Anyway, she was a lovely girl, and she was like she was staying night at his house, and he caught his dad looking at, he went to the toilet and caught his dad looking in the bedroom door, talking to himself, saying, "Lovely, beautiful, beautiful." It's like, "Hey, Dad," yeah, but for Albie was lovely as well, and all the parents were lovely, weren't they? Really,
They were. I mean, for them, it was like obviously seeing their children, like their two boys, both families, seeing their two boys, being that successful,
yeah,
and enjoying everything that they were doing at the time. It must have been great for them as well. Yeah,
brilliant,
but they came and literally toured the world with us. Yeah,
yeah, they were lovely.
yeah.
Phil, sorry.
Well, yeah, I was going to say fabulous insights there with George and Andrew, and also family members. Football's so important, isn't it, for guys on the road? I remember sort of playing on one occasion. The only occasion I played football with a famous name was Phil Collins down in Stafford, Bingley Hall, as a student, and Harvey Goldsmith used to take us on board to do sort of loading and outloading, and we had a bit of time on our hands, and it was like, come on, come outside, play football, and it was Phil Collins and a few guys from the band. So yeah, good stuff. Right.
Yeah, it's one of those light-hearted moments. Because everyone thinks it's such a glamorous thing, touring. It's bloody hard work.
It is bloody hard work, yeah.
And so when you get opportunities to let off a bit of steam, like playing football or whatever it might be, then you take those moments and
yeah, valuable time and a big escape from, you say, the hard work, the dedication, and the concentration on, especially from a security level. When we've been focusing a lot, you've also worked with names like Duran Duran and so many others. But then you sort of, with your experience, you sort of branched out, didn't you? And sort of went into sort of training, sort of education of budding security people.
Yeah, so while I was at Showset during the 80s, we felt as a company that more needed to be done in terms of educating the people that were working for us and training the people to do the job, whatever. And so we started to develop training courses, and one of them was, for touring personnel, and so I basically wanted to. So I introduced a scheme with, and I spoke to a couple of friends of mine who are tour managers and promoters, and said, look, you want people to come out and tour with you, but they need education. They need to be able to know what to expect and what to do. And the only way you get that is by actually doing it. And you're not going to take anyone, you shouldn't be taking anyone with no experience or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I convinced some people that at our cost that we would provide additional staff, security people, to work alongside the current tour people. We would pay their salary, we would pay their hotels, so effectively free of charge to them. And so yeah, we started sending people out, effectively training them to work as security on tours.
Yeah, right.
And it was very successful. I think it was quite successful, and quite a number of the people that were at Showsec at the time. And there are a lot of names I could go through, but they went on to be really, really good at their jobs and carried on working. I can think, Michael Richardson, for example, who I put on Mariah Carey, I don't know, 30 years ago, still works for her today. you know, Paul Dalla Negra, who worked with me on George, worked with on Simply Red. You know, his brother Ricky did the same, worked with me, works with Carrie Underwood in America. You know, there are a lot of people that went through that kind of process of actually working on the road, getting experience, and then went on to do their own thing. And then I think it was, and then and then security became, you know, and then licensing came in the security industry, and it, you know, more training became a much more important role in terms of how to deal with people, how to deal with irate customers without,
sure,
you know, without getting physical, and you know, how to de-escalate situations. And it you know, and it's proved its worth. I think security nowadays, in terms of general security and even tour security, is much more professional and much more regulated. And I think it's benefits to everyone, you know.
From what you're saying there, sounds like a strong bond, a loyalty between personal security personnel and some stars. You mentioned Mariah Carey and her.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I you know, my own experience with George, you do build up. I mean, you know, you still got to, you know, the thing about relationships with people that you work for, is understanding that there is a line that you shouldn't cross when you're working, and you can be friends with people. I mean, you know, when I look back at my friendship with George, I mean, we became friends. You know, he came to my wedding, we used to go to parties and whatever.
Wow.
But when we were working, you know, when I was working for him, it was work.
Yeah, sure.
And that you know, friendship, don't put it aside, but it's like there's a line. And I think a lot of the successful guys in the touring industry, they know where that line is, and so they don't cross it. And that's why they're doing what they're doing with people.
Exactly, they know that line. So yeah, regarding George Michael, I mean, after his farewell concert, well, the Wham farewell concert in Wembley, he went solo. I suppose you could say you went solo because you became his personal security guy for quite a long time. How did that come about?
Well, yeah, so the 86 was the Wham final gig, yeah. And then obviously he went off to record Faith. And no one, I mean, to be fair, no one really knew. I mean, George was always going to be a big star, but no, I don't think anyone really knew how big a star he was going to become.
Yeah.
And he got American management in at that point. Michael Lippman and Rob Kahane. And you know, he recorded Faith, and I remember Faith being released, and there was a big album release party at the Savoy that CBS Sony did, and they asked me to assist with the security for that. And George was there, and he mentioned something about going out on tour, and he said, "Are you up for it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." I hadn't expected, to be honest. But I'd honestly expected, I think, that the Americans were going to take over because he had American management. I kind of thought that, you know, that would be it. But he personally said to me, "Look, you know, I'm going to be on tour. You know, I'd quite like it if you would be the head of security." And I was like, "Well, I can definitely, you know, handle that."
You can imagine the Americans saying, "Yeah, we don't want Brits doing security. They've got no idea. We're bringing our big boys, our big team."
I think they wanted to bring in, you know, I think to be fair, you know, they wanted to take over completely in terms of the crew and production, everything.
Yeah.
But I think that George was quite loyal to people that he'd worked with, even in those days. And so he said, "No, you know, my tour manager is going to be Jake, and you know, I've worked with him before, and I want Ronnie on as head of security, and I want this person as my son." And you know, you know, he was quite adamant about key roles.
Yeah.
Even though we all knew, you know, the Americans knew that it was going to be a big American tour, and it was a big American tour. So you know, come the start of the Faith tour, I think, which is in Japan, if I remember rightly. That was how that was my inroads to a long career with him. You know.
Yeah, amazing. How was that in America then, with the sort of home ground of the senior management, his managers?
It's fine. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I got on really well with the management in the end. You know, they were quite, again, I think they kind of left people to get on and do their jobs. You know, once the tour was up and running, once we'd done all the rehearsals and all the, you know, most of the kinks for the show were out, were taken care of in terms of production wise and whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, from a security point of view, we have very little say in any of that. That's not
Sure.
But once everything was up and running, the management were really kind of like just okay about stuff. They were like, just tell us what we need to do, where we need to be, and what time we need to be there. And I always said to them, so like, you know, again, you know, the rule is if you're not there when we're ready to leave, then you're going to get left behind. And we did a couple of times. But they were fine. American, them, you know, I got on really well with them in the end. You know, they were okay. I know that some people had, you know, more to deal with them. I mean, I think tour management, production people had more to deal with management in that respect, and you know, issues around staging, sound lights.
Sure. So Russell, were you involved in that tour as well?
Well, I should have been on it really. Jake offered me stage manager for that, and I'd worked with George quite a bit then, obviously with Wham, because what happened was halfway through the touring with Wham, Ken Watts left, if you remember, and I took over his role. You know, there was a lot of personal looking after George at the side of the stage. I was doing lots of other tasks as well. And for Wham, the final, I was assistant production manager. And Jake, we it's no secret, and we laughed about it with Steve Martin on, you know, Jake was very frugal, typical Scotsman with the money. And me being an ambitious young upstart, and I was busy on some other things, but I really wanted to do the Faith Tour because it's sort of become part of my life for 3.5 years, you know, the Wham thing and all that. And I don't know if you remember, and I don't know whether you were on it. I don't remember you being on it, but Jake wasn't available, and Siobhan, who was his personal assistant, Siobhan Bailey, bless her, is no longer with us as well. She called me and said, Jake can't do this. He's doing this AIDS benefit at Wembley. Mel Bush was promoting it. And we need to put a band together. We need to get everyone together. There's no money because it's a bit like Live Aid. I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to do it. No problem. So we rehearsed at Nomis Studios and we put the band together, rehearsed at Nomis Studios and ended up doing it. But I don't remember, were you on that?
Which one was that?
It was the AIDS benefit. It was between Wham, the final, and the Faith Tour. For some reason, Jake wasn't available. He was out on something.
Was it at the Wembley? Was that the Wembley thing?
Wembley Arena.
The arena with Princess Diana.
No, well, I don't know if she was there. I didn't see her. I mean, there was Elton played, and he'd just had his throat operation, and he played. I remember, and
we did quite a few of those sort of benefits and one-off events.
What I remember was it was an absolute pleasure to do it. I had no problem because I'd earned a living. I bought my first house on the back of working for George and Andrew. I'm very grateful of that and love working with them, knew all the people, knew the band. But at the end of it, it was really sweet because, and I remember having some really deep conversations with George about the AIDS thing, safe sex thing. And you know, George, when he was talking to you seriously, those brown eyes, he looked straight into you, didn't he? Yeah. You know, and I'll never forget that. And we had some very sort of adult conversations, which we don't very often do on the road. And at the end of it, Siobhan came round with these envelopes and said, can you give this to the band? There's one for you as well. And George felt very awkward that he'd asked everybody to work for nothing, which we all agreed to do. But she said, oh, he just came in the office and said, can you just draw out all this money? And it was a lot of money, you know?
That's exactly
but he didn't want to give it to us. He just got Siobhan to do it. And I remember that. And I remember that with fondness because I had some very nice conversations with him about these things, and some very funny moments as well. Like I used to do the quick change with him, and I remember Wham the final. Where we were under the stage and the band were playing after Young Guns. The band were playing. I can't remember what the tune was they were playing, and they just kept playing. And you remember they used to wear those suede, and we couldn't get his bloody pants off. And there was Yoda, Melanie, and myself pulling George's pants down, and he's got this G-string on and sweating, and we all just got the giggles. And the band are playing, there's 80,000 or whatever there were out, and we couldn't get these blooming trousers off. And I remember saying to George, I said, George, if the Sun photographer sticks his head round the corner now, we're in trouble, but we were just like laughing. But moments like that you remember and you cherish, and I'm sure you got loads of them. But yeah, it was really a pleasure to work with the guy in that way. But that was the one that I don't think had any security. But sorry, there is one other thing as well, which George was very gracious about. I had and it comes up in a lot of the podcasts, I worked a lot with John Henry's, who used to provide the equipment. I started with John Henry's, and I sort of felt I owed John Henry some favor, and he kept saying to me, and every man and his dog rehearsed at John Henry's, but George had never been in there. And he said, look, can you get George to come in? He said, I'd love him to come in, I said, I can't just ask George to come in. Anyway, there was an opportunity which I sort of manufactured, which was very unprofessional, really, but I did it because I loved John Henry, and I felt I owed him a bit. And George needed to program the drum machine for Everything She Wants for this AIDS benefit thing, and he needed a little studio. And so I told John Henry, I said, I'll bring George in. He give us one of his little demo studios, to do this thing. And he said, oh, it's all booked up. He said, but I can give you the control room. And I put him in this control room, and George was very gracious. It was nothing like, it wasn't Abbey Road Studios, but he came. And I remember afterwards sitting in the canteen at John Henry's, and he met John Henry and all that. And I remember talking to him about what parent, like when he was younger and his parents not taking him seriously about wanting to be a pop star. And he said, I just kept at it and all that. And I said, well, I was in a band, but I didn't take it seriously. He said, yeah, exactly. It was a bit of fun. But for me, I was driven, and I had a really good conversation with the guy, but he had his moments when he could just level with you. And he had his moments when he was incredibly professional. And he knew what he wanted. That was the thing. He really knew what he wanted.
I think throughout his career, he knew exactly what he wanted.
Very driven, but not in a nasty way. Like some are driven in a nasty way, but he was driven. He knew what he was doing. He knew what path he wanted to take, and ultimate respect for that. Sorry again, Phil.
You digress. You had that tricky moment with George trying to get his pants off, and he said, "Good job, the Sun photographer wasn't around." So, Ronnie, over your 30 years of being so close to this absolute huge megastar, there must have been some tricky moments and some very funny ones during that period of 30 years or so. Can you give us some indication of some of those perhaps funny moments and
funny moments?
Yeah.
There are a lot of funny moments. I think it's one that springs to mind. So I think we were on the Faith tour. We were in Toronto, and we'd had a night off, and we'd been out to dinner, and there was a famous club in Toronto. I can't remember the name of it at the time. And George said, let's go. We should go to the club. I was like, okay. So we organised it all, and off we all went. Jake was with us. I had 3 security guys with me. My best friend Nigel, bless him, and 2.
Oh, Nigel, yeah, Nigel Brown.
Yeah. And off we went to this club. About 8 of us, I guess. It must have been about 8 of us anyway. And we're in the club, and it's all fun. And everybody's obviously, it's George Michael. Everyone knows he is, and they're making a big fuss of him, and girls are all trying to get close to him when he's on the dance floor and whatever. Anyway, at one point, he says, "I'm just going to go to the toilet." So I said to Nigel, "You better follow him, just in case, So they go in, and apparently He's standing there doing what you do, and a guy next to him says, and he knows who he is, and the guy next to him says to his mate, I don't know what the fucking big deal about this George Michael bloke being in here. All the girls are running around like, what's he got that I haven't got? And George looks over him and says, I think it's about $20 million. Now that could have gone the wrong way.
Absolutely.
You know, the guy could have got the guy just laughed and just said, fair play, mate, off he went.
Good one.
And that is George, you know, he could take the, you know, he could give it as good as he got it.
What about the one on YouTube that's so funny? And George sees the funny side of it. I mean, you were like trying to shoo the guy, say, yeah, come on. And he was saying,
that's the classic. I mean, when we were doing the opening night at Wembley Stadium, the first ever at the new stadium, and we'd been to rehearsals, sound check. And because George lived in Highgate, he said, well, I'm not going to stay here all day. We might as well go, you know, we'll go home later. And so I'd spoken to, we'd gone in underneath into the underground part of Wembley Stadium, where the dressing rooms are. And when we were leaving, our security people said, right, you need to, you know, leave this way. When you come back in the same way. Like, okay, fine. So all good and gone. What happened in the meantime was that there was a change of staff, and the security that were manning that entry point were replaced by the car park people. Weren't given the information that we were coming. So when we turned back up, the guy looks and says, no, you can't come in this way. And I said, you know, I showed him my pass, and he's like, you know, the classic, that's not George Michael, I'd know him a mile away thing. David, George's friend at the time, was filming everything. And he, you know, he thought it was just the funniest thing.
That's so funny.
That's funny. Brilliant.
I'm so glad that was documented, because that's hilarious.
Yeah, and people still think it was set up, and it wasn't. I can assure you 100% it wasn't set up. It was completely you know, as it happened. But yeah, that was quite a funny moment. But there are many, you know, there are things like I mean, there was one incident I can remember. I mean, we were in, and this is more to do with his management and George. You know, we were out in, I think it was Austin in Texas. And again, we'd gone out for a night out. We had a day off, so we went out for dinner. And we were in this restaurant bar place, and we're sitting there. And again, people recognize, they know who he is. And, you know, you can see the words going around with people and the pointing of fingers and whatever. And this girl comes over and she says, can I get an autograph? And I said to her, look, you can, but can you wait until we finish dinner? And when we're leaving, he'll happily sign, you know. And she said, yeah, okay, that's fine. Anyway, she went back to the bar, and she's with a guy. And the guy obviously took it the wrong way. And the next thing I know, he's leaning against the bar, and he moves his jacket, and on the side of his trousers, he's got a gun on a holster.
Oh.
So Rob, the manager, looks at me and says, Ronnie, the guy over there, he's got a gun. And I said to him, I can see that, Rob. He said, what are we going to do about it? I said, it's still in its holster. Nothing to worry about.
What? Oh, dear.
He's like,
Mr. Cool, Ronnie.
He just laughed. George laughed and says, oh, I'm going to go. And he got up and went over and signed her autograph for her. One of those, you know, there's just some.
Is this just a myth? But they're going back to the Wham days in Miami. I don't know if you were there, or maybe Dave Mulder. Maybe it's just a myth. Maybe it's not true. But I heard that a girl got one of these little mini guns out at the bar and said I could shoot George Michael and I'd be famous, something like that. Were you there, or maybe it's Dave Mulder?
I've been there. I mean, I honestly don't remember that one at all.
I mean, she was sort of like drunk or coked out of her head,
yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you know, we you know, we never you know, it's interesting because there are obviously, going back to sort of security issues and stuff with people like that, is that 99.9% of the people don't want to cause you any harm.
No.
Yeah, sure.
They're fans, yeah.
Fans, they want to see you, they want to hear you, whatever. they might scream a lot and they would like to grab hold of you and touch you and kiss you and whatever. And obviously, you know, every now and again you're going to get a, you know, deranged or lunatic type thing. You know, we've seen that happen over the years. You know, John Lennon famously, and
yeah.
So you can't, you know, you have to take threats seriously. I mean, you know, I can remember a couple of times, you know, especially not so much in the UK. In America, we had a couple of threats where, you know, FBI might have got involved and spoke to us about something, and told us what they were doing to try and alleviate any issues. Local police, you know, I remember going into Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky once, and being met by a chief of police as we got off the plane, who said he'd had some issues with a member of, you know, supposedly fan, who'd been making some threats and stuff. And you know, you rely at that point, you kind of rely on them to be able to deal with that sort of thing. Because you know, what you're going to do, you can't, you know, physically search 12,000 people coming into an arena to see if you've got a weapon on them. So you have to rely on local law enforcement, local security, and stuff like that. But generally, you don't. You know, generally, it's not physical threats to worry about. With bands like Duran, Wham, you know, Spandau, back in those days in the 80s, it was just about uncontrolled fan frenzy.
Yeah.
You know, and people would get hurt. You know, like if you didn't have, if you hadn't planned properly, people get hurt. You know, we've seen that.
Sure.
You know, people just, you know, uncontrolled. They rush the stage. You know, the barriers aren't done properly. You know, it can be a dangerous situation when you've got thousands of people trying to, you know, attend.
Of course.
So, Ronnie, a fascinating insight to your role and your part in the Wham tours and so many others, and a fascinating insight into George Michael himself. You know, a person who's been greatly missed and someone who, you know, left the world of music far too young. So, just a final note really on this, and I mean, we could talk for a long, long time. Being so close to George over that period, and you've given us a lot of your memories, what would be your very special, lasting memory of George Michael?
I think generally he was a really, really nice person. He was a very genuine person. He was a very generous person. I mean, it's been proved over the, you know, since his death. But he was just generally a very nice person. Never had, you know, he and I never had a crossword in the 30 odd years that I worked with him. I think I always listened to his opinions about what he wanted George was, you know, he was never one for wanting overt security. He wanted to leave, you know, say in some, you know, in a lot of ways when he lived in London, he wanted to be as normal as possible. You know, when he lived in Highgate, he would go to the local restaurants and pubs and whatever. But he understood the need when he would be, if he was attending an event, obviously when he was on his own concert tours and stuff like that, you know, he accepted that's a part of touring, that you have to have these things in place.
Yeah.
Why, you know, like, you know, but yeah, I think just generally, it was a really nice, it was a pleasure to work for. I mean, and as I say, we never had a crossword. We got on really well. We became friends, but work was work, and we both accepted that. You know, when we were working, we were working. Once we were finished work, then that's a whole different ballgame. You know, we were sitting.
And
you know,
going by what you just said there, a pleasure to work with. You can't ask for anything else, can you? You can't ask for any more, can you? Fabulous, fabulous.
I think that's what I mean. Jake Duncan more or less said the same thing. Tour manager. I mean, you obviously work with Jake a lot, and I work with Jake a lot as well. And we've become we remained friends all through the years. But he said exactly the same thing, Ronnie. And I know your tribute there to George is, you know, a bit hard for you because you really were quite close to him for so many years. But Yeah, sadly lost, you know, to the world.
Oh,
And another one, I don't want to be too doom and gloom to finish our podcast, but another one you mentioned, who was obviously a friend of yours, and I really enjoyed his company because we had a passion for football as well, was Nigel Brown. And you know, we've lost too many of our friends and colleagues over the years, haven't we?
yeah, yeah. I mean, Nigel, sadly, you know, he that was a tragic accident in on the Eric Clapton tour. He was
Yeah,
killed. Crash,
in
yeah.
a helicopter crash. Yeah, but
Nigel and I worked together on with George and many other things, and he worked on Simply Red, and he worked on the Cult, and
yeah,
also
lovely guy.
great. It was a
Lovely
lovely
guy.
guy. Brilliant.
So Ronnie, what are you doing these days? What have you been doing? I mean, touring with other people. I heard you had a chauffeur company going. Is that still going?
Yeah,
Or
so I mean, I've had a bit of a varied career. When you know, I had a chauffeur business for many years. You know, when George kind of gave up touring, I wasn't particularly looking to work with too many other people at the time, so
yeah,
I had a chauffeur company. But recently, in the last, I mean, I worked with Lana Del Rey on her first couple of tours, which was she's an interesting person. She's a very, very talented young lady.
yeah.
Very talented. A bit misunderstood, I think, but you know, really, really talented. And I worked with Dua Lipa recently. I've known Dua now for 10 years, who's again extremely talented and extremely nice, and a pleasure to work for. But now I've retired from my touring role. I've hung my touring hat up.
Like us all.
Eh?
Like us all.
Like I saw, it gets to a
Jake,
point.
me, Steve Martin, we're all like, no, can't do that anymore.
It's a young man. It's a young, no, say young man. It's a young
It is.
person's game.
It is.
So now I've got a few clients that I work with in terms of driving, Durban one and Florence Welsh and a couple of other people, just to keep me off the golf courses. I don't play. No interest.
What's your handicap?
If me would be my hand.
Yeah, very good. Like it. I like it. Yeah.
Ronnie,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you quickly because you're a wealth of information. You remember Bob Tame, who used to drive?
Bob Tame, yes.
Is he? I mean, is he with us still?
I don't know. Bob was a cab driver, a London cab driver.
I've got some great stories with him on another podcast.
I mean, yeah, because Jake on that tour Jake had hired one of those sort of American Dodge Ram type minibus driver. I mean, he was just the funniest.
What a
guy.
character! So for our viewers and listeners, Bob Tame is an East End. I mean, he wouldn't even mind me saying it. It was he was just a likable rogue, really. It was from the East End. I mean, he tried to sell me a dodgy car from his friends in the East End, which I luckily was talked myself out of. But I mean, he told me about all his antics, you know, growing up and, you know, sitting with Reggie and Ronnie Cray, having a drink with them and stuff. But, you know, he was a lovely guy. And he was the chauffeur. He was George's chauffeur for a while, wasn't he? The boys and
he drove us all through that big tour, through the 1984 big tour.
I wondered whether he came from you, though. That's what I was going to ask.
No, I think Jake found him, if I remember right. I can't remember how he came about, but
we all love Bob.
But he was, yeah. I mean, and he literally, you know, he'd be swearing, and effing and blinding at everyone in the van. You know, especially with when Andrew and his mates were in the van, and they would just kick off and start fighting each other, and he'd slam the brakes on and like jump in the back, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, he was a real character, really.
Yeah, all right. Sadly, we have to come to an end, don't we, Phil?
Yes. I mean, what a fascinating insight. And as I started off with, sort of traveling around the world in terms of rock and roll, and today insights into fan behavior in Japan and China. I mean, we're getting broader and broader. It's fascinating insights. And Ronnie, so many big thanks to you for joining us and all those recollections and of your experiences and different angles of work, professionalism in the world of rock and roll. So, Ronnie, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ronnie. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, take care.
And you take care.
That's it. Thanks, Russ. Another great one here on our podcast series. I'm looking forward to the next one. We'll keep you in suspense to what that one might be, but make certain you're in tune on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and of course, YouTube. Bye for now.
It's only rock and roll. A Phil Blizzard radio production.
Available on Apple, Amazon, Angami, Spotify, Deezer, Google, and all good podcast channels, and also now on YouTube. And if you would like to have a podcast production for your organisation, do get in touch with me. Drop me an email, philblizzardmedia@gmail.com.
A Phil Blizzard radio production.